A child has a meltdown and no one can help them. A waitress kneels down, breathes with them, and calms them down. The father reacts with anger, blinded by pride, but when he realizes the damage, it's too late, and all that remains is to search, with his heart in ruins, for the one who gave voice to love. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear all year. The rain crashed down on Chicago like a heavy curtain, turning the streets into turbulent rivers and erasing the gray of the sky with an even denser gray. Michael Anderson held the steering wheel of the imported black sedan tightly, his eyes fixed on the chaotic traffic forming ahead of him. Beside him, in the back seat, secured in her child's seat with almost obsessive care, was Sophia. 3.5 years old, with straight brown hair falling over her small shoulders and dark eyes that seemed to hold a silent, misunderstood universe. Sophia didn't speak. She had never spoken, not in the way other children spoke, at least. Michael had already consulted 6 different specialists, toured private clinics in the most affluent neighborhoods of the Windy City, and heard technical terms that still echoed in his mind like final sentences. Autism spectrum disorder, significant delay in verbal communication, sensory hypersensitivity. He had memorized every word, every report, every recommendation, but still, deep down, he couldn't fully accept it. Michael Anderson had built a tech empire from scratch, won awards, closed multi-million-dollar deals, and commanded entire teams with the firmness of someone who never admitted failure. How could he, then, not be able to help his own daughter say a single word? The rain beat violently against the glass, and Michael felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Sophia hated loud noises. She hated sudden changes. She hated crowded environments. And there he was, stuck in traffic, watching the little girl begin to squirm in her seat, her tiny fingers clenching into fists, her face contorting into an expression he knew all too well. It was the beginning. It always began like this. He needed to get out of there. He needed to find a place where he could wait for the storm to pass, where Sophia could breathe, where he could have just a few minutes of peace. Spotting a small coffee shop on the next corner, with a discreet sign and windows fogged by the rain, Michael turned the wheel sharply, parking the car in front of the establishment. He turned off the engine, took a deep breath, and looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Sophia had her eyes squeezed shut, her hands pressing against her own ears. He got out of the car, opened the back door, unbuckled the girl's seatbelt, and lifted her into his arms. Sophia curled up against her father's chest, trembling. Michael covered her head with his own jacket and ran to the coffee shop door, pushing it open with his shoulder. The small bell above the entrance tinkled, echoing through the small, cozy space, and Michael felt his daughter shudder violently in his arms. The coffee shop was simple: dark wood tables, mismatched chairs, a long counter where cookies and pastries were displayed under a slightly scratched glass case. The aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of cinnamon and butter. There were few customers, perhaps 5 or 6, scattered among the tables. Low conversations, the clinking of cups, the distant sound of the coffee machine at work, and the rain, always the rain, beating relentlessly outside. Michael chose a table in the corner, away from the windows, away from the other people. He sat Sophia in the chair next to his, carefully adjusting the girl's small body. She kept her eyes closed, her hands still pressed to her ears. He knew he needed to distract her, to draw her attention away from the sounds that tormented her. But how? Sophia didn't play with ordinary toys. She didn't interact in the expected way. She lived in her own world, surrounded by invisible walls he didn't know how to cross. A waitress approached their table. She was young, maybe 25, with a delicate, tired face of someone who worked long hours. Her apron was stained with coffee and flour, her brown hair pulled back in a hasty bun, a few strands escaping and falling onto her forehead. She smiled shyly, pulling a small notepad from her pocket. "Good afternoon, what can I get for you?" Michael barely looked at her. "2 coffees, 1 orange juice." The woman jotted it down and returned to the counter. Michael watched Sophia, feeling the tension build inside him. The girl was beginning to rock her body back and forth, a repetitive movement she always made when she was about to have a meltdown. He knew the signs. He knew every stage of the process, but knowing didn't make it any easier. It never did. Suddenly someone dropped a cup on the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the coffee shop like a gunshot. Sophia's eyes flew open, she gasped for air, and brought her hands to her face, scratching her own cheeks. Michael leaned forward, trying to hold his daughter's wrists. "Sophia, no, calm down, it's okay, Daddy's here." But it wasn't okay. Sophia started to scream, a sharp, desperate sound that cut through the air like a blade. She slid from her chair, falling to her knees on the floor, banging her hands against her own face, against the floor, against anything within reach. Michael quickly knelt, trying to wrap his arms around her, but the girl struggled with a surprising strength for someone so small. People started to stare. They always stared. Glances of pity, of discomfort, of silent judgment. Michael felt the heat rise up his neck, the familiar embarrassment taking hold of him. He was a powerful man, respected, even feared. But there, kneeling on the floor of a cheap coffee shop, holding his screaming daughter, he felt powerless, weak, defeated. Then, suddenly, someone knelt beside them. Michael looked up, ready to dismiss any help, to push away any intruder. But when he saw the waitress's face, something made him hesitate. She didn't have that look of pity. She didn't have the desperate expression of someone who didn't know what to do. There was calm there. There was something he couldn't name, but it made him fall silent, just watching. The woman didn't touch Sophia. She didn't try to hold her. She didn't say a word. Instead, she pulled a small set of illustrated cards from her apron pocket. Simple cards, made of cardstock, each with a colorful drawing. A star, a heart, a flower, a cloud. She held the star card in front of Sophia without forcing, without pressuring, just held it there, still waiting. Sophia continued to scream for a few seconds, but then her eyes, red and filled with tears, landed on the card. She blinked, confused. The waitress slowly turned the card over, showing the back where there was another image, this time of a moon. Sophia stopped screaming. Her body was still trembling, but the sound had ceased. She watched the cards with an intensity Michael rarely saw. The waitress then began to breathe in an exaggerated, slow and deep manner, expanding her chest, releasing the air. Through her mouth. Sophia watched her, mesmerized, and then, unexpectedly, the girl began to imitate her. She took a deep breath, let it out, took another deep breath. Her shoulders began to relax. Her hands, which had been frantically beating against the floor, now rested on her knees. The crisis was passing. Michael couldn't believe what he was seeing. Years of therapies, of specialists, of expensive and complex methods, and here was a coffee shop waitress with paper cards and controlled breathing, doing something he had never managed to do. He should have been grateful. He should have been relieved. But what he felt was different. It was anger, it was humiliation. It was the deep, visceral fear that he wasn't enough, that he would never be enough. The waitress stayed there for a few more minutes, showing the cards, breathing along with Sophia, until the girl was completely calm. Then she stood up slowly, put the cards back in her pocket, and returned to the counter as if nothing had happened. Michael lifted Sophia from the floor, placing her back in her chair, still stunned by what he had witnessed. He felt the gazes of the other customers now, less curious, more understanding, but that only made things worse. The waitress returned with their order. She placed the cups and the glass of juice on the table carefully, still with that discreet smile on her lips. Michael stared at her, feeling his wounded pride burn inside him like a hot coal. "Thank you, but I didn't ask for your help," he said, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. The woman blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to help." "Help?" Michael felt the anger rise, irrational, uncontrolled. "You think I don't know how to take care of my own daughter? You think I need pity from a stranger?" "I wasn't pitying anyone," she replied, her voice low but firm. "I was just speaking the language she needed to hear." "Speaking the language?" Michael laughed, a humorless sound. "You know nothing about her. Nothing. So don't meddle where you're not wanted." The woman took a step back, her face turning red. The people around them had stopped talking, watching the scene in awkward silence. Sophia, still seated, looked at the waitress with wide eyes as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. "I'm sorry if I offended you," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to help." Michael didn't answer. He threw a few bills on the table, scooped Sophia into his arms, and walked out of the coffee shop, back into the rain that was now falling less heavily. He put his daughter in the back seat, buckled her in with trembling hands, got into the car, and started the engine. As he drove through the soaked streets of Chicago, he felt the weight of guilt beginning to settle in his chest. But he pushed the feeling away. He had done the right thing. He had defended himself. He had maintained control, or at least that's what he tried to convince himself. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Michael was alone in the living room of the penthouse where he lived. It was a spacious, modern apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the illuminated city below. Everything in it was impeccable. Everything in it was perfect. But it was also empty, cold, lonely. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, sat on the leather sofa and just stared into nothingness. He thought about the waitress. He thought about the cards. He thought about the way Sophia had responded. And he thought about himself, about the way he had reacted. Had he gone too far? Had he been unfair? He stood up, walked to Sophia's room, and opened the door slowly. The girl was sleeping peacefully, her face serene under the soft light of the lamp. Michael approached, watching his daughter with a mix of love and despair. He would do anything for her. Anything. But sometimes it felt like anything wasn't enough. That's when he saw it. On the nightstand next to the bed was a crumpled napkin. Michael picked it up, opening it carefully, and there, drawn with colored pencils, was a simple drawing. 2 stick figures. One had its hair tied in a bun. The other was small, with long, straight hair. The waitress and Sophia. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, holding the napkin with both hands. Sophia had kept that drawing. She had brought it home. She had placed it by her bed, as if it were a treasure. And he had humiliated the woman his daughter had clearly connected with. He had pushed away the only person who had managed to truly calm Sophia. The guilt he had tried to ignore returned with full force, heavy as lead. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, Michael Anderson admitted to himself that maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong. The following days were a silent torment. Sophia was different. It wasn't the crisis. It wasn't the despair. It was something more subtle, more profound. She would stand in front of the window, looking out at the street, as if she were waiting for someone. Whenever Michael took her anywhere in the car, the girl would press her small hand against the glass whenever they passed a coffee shop, her eyes searching, searching. Michael knew what she was looking for. He knew who she was looking for, and it tore him apart inside. On the third night, after putting Sophia to bed again, Michael sat on the floor of his daughter's room, his back against the wall, the napkin with the drawing in his hands. He had built an entire life based on control, on power, on never admitting weakness. But now, looking at those 2 stick figures, he realized that all that control meant nothing. That all that power was useless if he couldn't give his daughter what she truly needed. And what Sophia needed, he finally admitted, was not him. It was that woman. That stranger with a stained apron and paper cards who, in some inexplicable way, spoke the language his daughter understood. Michael stood up, carefully placed the napkin in the nightstand drawer, and left the room. He returned to the living room, picked up his phone, and just stood there, holding the device, trying to find the courage. The courage to do what he knew he had to do. The courage to swallow his pride and admit he needed help. Not for himself, but for Sophia. And it was then, in the darkness of that impeccable and empty room, that Michael Anderson made a decision that would change everything. He would go back to that coffee shop. He would look for that woman and he would apologize, not because it was easy, but because his daughter deserved it. And because, perhaps for the first time in his life, Michael was willing to put his pride aside and do what was right, not what was comfortable. The rain had passed, but the storm inside him was just beginning, and Michael knew that to get through it he would have to be braver than he had ever been in his entire successful and carefully controlled life. He would have to be vulnerable. He would have to be human. And that, he would discover, was much harder than building any empire. 5 days passed before Michael finally found enough courage to return to the coffee shop. 5 days in which Sophia continued to look out the window, searching for something he couldn't give her. 5 days in which the crumpled napkin weighed in his jacket pocket like a stone. 5 days in which pride and guilt waged a silent battle inside his chest. It was Saturday morning when he finally parked the car in front of the establishment. This time there was no rain. The Chicago sky was clear, a rare blue that seemed almost strange among the tall buildings. Michael turned off the engine but remained there, his hands still on the wheel, his heart beating faster than it should. He wasn't used to apologizing. He didn't know how to do it. He had built an entire career on being firm, decisive, never backing down. But now, for the first time, he needed to back down. He needed to admit he had been wrong. He got out of the car, locked the doors, and walked to the entrance of the coffee shop. The bell tinkled again as he pushed the door open, and Michael felt his stomach tighten. There were more people this time, couples having coffee, groups of friends chatting, the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air. He looked at the counter and saw her there preparing a cappuccino, her apron clean this time, her hair tied, back in the same hurried way. Marina. He had asked one of the other employees for her name the last time he was there. Marina Scott, 26 years old, had been working at the coffee shop for 3 years, always helpful, always kind. That was all he had managed to find out. She didn't see him arrive. She was focused on the coffee, carefully making designs in the foam, her tongue caught between her teeth in an expression of childish concentration. Michael approached the counter, clearing his throat. Marina looked up, and when she recognized him, her face tensed. She placed the cup on the counter, wiped her hands on her apron, and took a step back. "I need to talk to you," Michael said, his voice coming out quieter than he intended. Marina exchanged a look with her colleague who stood beside her, an older woman with grey hair. The colleague nodded, taking over the counter, and Marina walked around it, standing in front of Michael. There was a cautious distance between them. She crossed her arms over her chest, waiting. "About the other day," Michael began, feeling the words catch in his throat. "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I shouldn't have treated you like that. You were trying to help, and I was unfair." Marina said nothing. She just kept looking at him, her face unreadable. Michael took a deep breath, forcing himself to continue. "My daughter, Sophia, she has autism. She doesn't speak. She gets scared easily. And I don't know how to handle it. I've tried everything, specialists, therapies, methods, but nothing has worked like what you did. In 5 minutes, you managed to calm her down in a way I never could in 3 years. And that scared me. It made me feel as if inadequate." He paused, feeling the lump in his throat. Marina uncrossed her arms, her expression softening a little. "You're not inadequate," she said softly. "It's hard, I understand." "How did you know what to do?" Michael asked, his voice filled with a vulnerability he rarely showed. "Where did those cards come from?" Marina hesitated, biting her lower lip. "My younger brother. He's also autistic, nonverbal. I grew up helping my mom take care of him. I learned about alternative communication, about how to calm him down, about how to understand what he needed without him having to speak. The cards are part of that. They're symbols, ways to communicate without words." Michael felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't name. It was relief, perhaps, or hope, or just the feeling that for the first time he wasn't completely alone. "Sophia has been missing you," he said, the words tumbling out before he could think. "She keeps looking out the window. She presses her hand against the car window when we pass coffee shops, and she kept a drawing of you and her together." Marina blinked, her eyes glistening. "Really?" Michael nodded, pulling the napkin from his pocket and holding it out to her. Marina took it carefully, unfolding it and looking at the 2 stick figures. A sad smile appeared on her lips. "She did this during the meltdown," Marina murmured. "I always carry colored pencils in my pocket. I gave them to her when I noticed she was starting to calm down. I thought she had thrown it away." "She kept it," Michael said, "and she's been sleeping with it next to her bed every night." Marina closed her eyes, clutching the napkin to her chest. When she opened them again, there were tears there that she quickly blinked away. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Michael took a deep breath, preparing to say the most difficult words he had ever spoken. "I want you to spend some time with her, with Sophia, even if it's just for an afternoon. She needs you. She needs someone who understands. And I need to learn. I need to see how you do it, how you connect with her." Marina looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, searching for something. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay, I can come on Sunday. It's my day off." Michael felt relief wash over him like a wave. "Thank you, seriously, thank you so much." Marina held the napkin out to him, but Michael shook his head. "Keep it. She made it for you." Marina tucked the napkin into her apron pocket, discreetly wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Michael wrote his penthouse address on a napkin, handed it to her, and left the coffee shop feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The following Sunday, Michael woke up earlier than usual. He cleaned the apartment himself, something he normally left to the housekeeper. He arranged Sophia's toys in the living room. He made coffee, bought fresh pastries from the corner bakery, got everything ready. He was nervous, more nervous than he got before important presentations to investors, because this time it wasn't about business. It was about his daughter, about a chance to perhaps finally be able to help her. The doorbell rang at 10 in the morning, right on time. Michael opened the door, and there was Marina, with a backpack on her shoulders and a shy smile on her face. She was wearing faded jeans and a simple cotton shirt, her hair loose and falling over her shoulders. She looked younger like this, without the apron, without the stress of work. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi. Come in." Marina entered, her eyes scanning the penthouse with a look of mild surprise. It was an impressive place, Michael knew. Huge windows, expensive minimalist decor, a panoramic view of the city. But suddenly, seeing it through her eyes, it all seemed cold, impersonal. "Sophia's in her room," Michael said, guiding her down the hall. "She doesn't know you're coming. I don't know how she'll react." "It's okay," Marina replied, adjusting the backpack on her shoulders. Michael opened the door to Sophia's room slowly. The girl was sitting on the floor, surrounded by building blocks that she didn't use to build, but to organize by color. It was one of her favorite activities, aligning, organizing, creating patterns. Sophia looked up when she heard the door open, and upon seeing Marina, she froze completely. For a moment, Michael feared his daughter wouldn't recognize her. But then Sophia dropped the block she was holding, scrambled to her feet and ran to Marina, hugging her legs tightly. Marina immediately knelt, returning the hug, her eyes closing with emotion. "Hi, Sophia," she whispered. "I missed you too." Michael stood there in the doorway, watching the scene. Something tightened in his chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was something else. It was gratitude. It was relief. It was the feeling that for the first time, someone understood his daughter in the way she deserved to be understood. Marina spent the entire afternoon with Sophia. She took more illustrated cards from her backpack, sensory objects with different textures, small musical instruments that made soft sounds. She sat on the floor of the room and worked with the girl using signs, drawings, exaggerated facial expressions. Sophia responded. She imitated, she tried. And little by little, she began to make new sounds, small grunts, murmurs. Nothing that sounded like words yet, but it was more than Michael had ever heard from her. He watched from the doorway, fascinated. Marina had infinite patience. She never forced, she never pushed. She just waited, offered, guided. And Sophia blossomed under that gentle attention, like a flower that had finally found the sun. The hours passed without Michael noticing. When Marina finally looked at the clock and said she had to go, it was almost 5 in the afternoon. Sophia held her hand, refusing to let go, and Marina had to promise she would return the next Sunday for the girl to finally let her leave. After Marina left, Michael got Sophia ready for dinner. The girl was different, more present, more alert. During her bath, she tried to imitate the sounds Marina had taught her. While brushing her teeth, she pointed at objects, something she had never done before. And when Michael put her in bed, Sophia held his face with her two small hands and looked him in the eyes. Really looked at him in a way she never had. Michael felt tears burn his eyes. "Good night, princess," he whispered, kissing his daughter's forehead. That night, alone in the living room, Michael allowed himself to cry with relief, with hope, with fear that it could all disappear, but also to cry with gratitude for Marina, for her patience, for her kindness, for having given Sophia something he couldn't give her alone. The following Sundays became sacred. Marina would arrive at 10 on the dot, spend the day with Sophia and leave at the end of the afternoon, leaving. The girl happier, more communicative, more alive. Michael watched everything from a distance, learning, trying to absorb every technique, every approach, but also, without realizing it, he began to watch Marina in a different way. The way she laughed when Sophia did something new. The way her eyes shone when the girl managed to imitate a sound. The way she sang softly while she worked, simple, melodious songs that Sophia loved. Marina had a light, a genuine kindness that wasn't willpower or obligation. It was simply who she was. In the 5th week, something extraordinary happened. Marina had brought a small whiteboard and colored markers. She was teaching Sophia to draw simple shapes, circles, squares, triangles. Sophia held the marker with difficulty, but she tried. Her tongue caught between her teeth in the same expression of concentration that Marina had. Then suddenly Sophia picked up the red marker and started to write. They weren't shapes, they were letters. Irregular, crooked, but they were letters. Michael, who was sitting on the sofa reviewing some work documents, didn't notice immediately, but Marina saw, and she brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes widening. "Michael," she called, her voice trembling. "Come see. This." He stood up quickly, approaching. Marina pointed to the whiteboard. There, written in uneven and imperfect red letters, but completely legible, were 4 words. "I love you, Daddy." Michael felt his legs give way. He fell to his knees beside Sophia, taking his daughter's face in his hands. Sophia looked at him, her deep, dark eyes shining with an intelligence he always knew was there, but had never been able to reach. "I love you too, princess," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I love you so much." Sophia smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there. Real. True. And Michael broke down. He hugged his daughter tightly, burying his face in her hair, letting the tears fall freely. Marina discreetly moved away, giving them space, but Michael reached out his hand, grabbing her wrist. "Thank you," he said, looking at her through his tears. "I don't know how to thank you. You gave me my daughter back." Marina knelt beside them, placing her hand over Michael's. "You never lost her. She was always here. She just needed someone to help her find the way." And there, the 3 of them together on the floor of the room, surrounded by colorful cards and scattered toys, something changed. It was no longer just about helping Sophia. It was no longer just about learning techniques. It was about belonging. It was about family. It was about finding, in the most unlikely of places, the people who were destined to change everything. Michael started inviting Marina to stay for dinner after their sessions. She would accept, and the 3 of them would eat together at the kitchen table, talking about Sophia's progress, about the plans for the following week. Marina told stories about her brother, about how he had learned to communicate through drawings. Michael talked about his company, about the challenges of balancing work and fatherhood, and Sophia would sit there between them, watching, absorbing, flourishing. Michael realized on one of those nights that he was falling in love. It wasn't something he had planned, it wasn't something he had wanted, but it was happening, as inevitable as the tide. The way Marina smiled, the way she sang to Sophia, the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention, everything about her drew him in in a way he hadn't experienced in years. But there was fear too. Fear of ruining what they had. Fear that his feelings would push Marina away. Fear that if he opened up, if he allowed himself to depend on her emotionally, it could destroy the fragile balance they had built. So he held it in. He locked his feelings away. He allowed himself only to watch, to admire, to silently wish for something that seemed out of reach. Marina, for her part, was also changing. She spoke more about her own past, about how growing up taking care of her brother had been difficult, about how she had given up on many dreams to be there for him, about how working at the coffee shop wasn't what she had planned for her life, but it was what allowed her the flexibility to help her family. "Have you ever thought about studying this?" Michael asked one night, after Sophia had gone to sleep. "Alternative communication. You're good at it. Very good." Marina shrugged, stirring the coffee Michael had made. "I've thought about it, but college is expensive, and I need to work." "What if I paid for it?" Marina looked up sharply, surprised. "What?" "Sophia needs you," Michael said, quickly, the words tumbling out. "And you have a talent. You could help other children. I would pay for your college. You could study, specialize." Marina shook her head, her expression closing off. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because it's not about the money, Michael. It never was. I didn't come here because you could pay. I came because Sophia needed me, and because I wanted to be here." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Michael looked at her, saw the blush rise on her cheeks, saw the way she averted her gaze. And he understood. She felt it too. She was also caught in the same invisible web that bound them. But before he could say anything, Marina's phone rang. She answered quickly, her expression changing as she listened to what was being said on the other end. "I have to go," she said, standing up hastily. "My brother isn't feeling well." Michael stood up too. "Do you want me to drive you?" "No, it's okay. I'll get an Uber." "Marina," he called as she was at the door. "Be careful." She looked back, smiled sadly, and left. Michael stood there, alone, in the now silent living room, feeling the emptiness she had left behind. And he realized with a frightening clarity that he didn't want to live without her anymore. He couldn't imagine Sundays without Marina anymore. He couldn't imagine Sophia without her anymore. He couldn't imagine himself without her anymore. But the fear was still there. The fear of opening his heart and discovering it wasn't enough. The fear that his past, his flaws, his hard-edged way of being would push away the only person who had managed to bring light into his and his daughter's life. So Michael did what he always did when he was afraid. He retreated. He built walls. He decided it was better to keep his distance, to maintain control, than to risk everything and lose. He didn't know yet that this decision would cost more than he could ever imagine. He didn't know that fear sometimes is the greatest enemy of happiness, and he didn't know that very soon everything he had so carefully built was about to come crashing down. The Sunday routine had become so natural that Michael could no longer imagine life without it. 8 weeks had passed since Marina had started visiting. Sophia was unrecognizable, not just because of her progress in communication, which was impressive, but because of the way the girl had opened up to the world. She laughed now, she played, she tried new words every day, and she looked at Marina with an adoration that both broke and healed Michael's heart. But not everything was perfect. Beatrice, Michael's older sister, had started asking questions. Beatrice was a lawyer, always protective of her brother and niece, especially after Sophia's mother had disappeared from their lives shortly after the girl's birth. Beatrice didn't trust easily. And she didn't trust Marina. She showed up at the penthouse on a Thursday night, unannounced, wearing the serious expression she used when she was about to give one of her lectures. Michael was helping Sophia with dinner when the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find his sister there, in her impeccable suit and expensive leather bag slung over her arm. "We need to talk," Beatrice said, brushing past him and entering without an invitation. Michael closed the door, sighing. "About what?" "About this Marina." He felt his muscles tense. "What about her?" Beatrice placed her bag on the sofa, turning to Face him. Michael, do you really think this is normal? A coffee shop waitress showing up here every Sunday, spending the day with your daughter. You barely know this woman. I know enough, Michael replied, crossing his arms. She's helping Sophia. You've seen the progress my daughter has made. Yes, I have, and that's exactly why I'm worried. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe she's interested in something else? You're a wealthy man, Michael, very wealthy, and she's a woman working a job that barely pays the rent. Don't you find that suspicious? Michael felt anger begin to boil. Beatrice, you don't know anything about her. And you do, Beatrice retorted, her voice rising. Have you checked her background? Do you know where she's lived? Who she associates with? Or did you just let a complete stranger into your life because she was nice to Sophia? She's not a stranger, Michael said through gritted teeth. And it's not about the money. It never was. Beatrice looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head, picking up her bag. Fine. If you don't want to listen, I won't force you. But I'm keeping an eye on this. And if I find out she's taking advantage of you or Sophia, I will intervene. Understood? She left before Michael could reply, leaving him alone in the living room with the uncomfortable feeling that something had shifted. He tried to push the thoughts away, returning to the kitchen where Sophia was waiting, but Beatrice's words echoed in his mind like a plague. What Michael didn't know was that Beatrice had no intention of simply keeping an eye on things. She had already taken action. She had hired a private investigator, a discreet and efficient man she occasionally used for difficult cases at work. And this investigator had started following Marina, documenting her movements, recording conversations, looking for anything that might confirm Beatrice's suspicions. 2 weeks later, Beatrice had what she wanted, a recording, a conversation between Marina and a friend, captured while the two were talking at a bus stop after work. The investigator had edited the audio, cutting parts, rearranging sentences, creating something that sounded incriminating. And it worked. In the edited recording, Marina seemed to be saying that she saw an opportunity in Sophia's situation, that Michael was rich and lonely, that if she played her cards right, she could secure a comfortable future. The words were there, clear enough to seem real but completely out of context, twisted until they became something Marina had never actually said. Beatrice sent the audio to Michael on a Friday night, accompanied by a simple message. Listen to this before she comes back on Sunday. You need to know the truth. Michael was in his office when he received the message. He put on his headphones and pressed play, unaware that what he was about to hear would change everything. Marina's voice echoed in his ears, talking about opportunities, about Michael, about money. He listened once, twice, 3 times, and with each repetition he felt his world crumbling around him. It couldn't be true. It couldn't. Marina wasn't like that. She couldn't be. But there it was, in her voice, in her words. And Michael, who had always been trained to trust evidence, facts, concrete proof, couldn't see past what he was hearing. The fear he had suppressed for weeks returned with full force. The fear of being deceived. The fear that it was all a sham. The fear that he wasn't worthy of something real. He spent a sleepless night, listening to the recording over and over, trying to find an alternative explanation, trying to convince himself there was a mistake. But with each listen, the anger grew. The sense of betrayal intensified. And when Sunday arrived, Michael was ready to confront Marina. He was ready to protect Sophia. He was ready to do what he thought was right, even if he was completely wrong. Marina arrived at 10 on the dot, as always. She brought a bag with new cards she had made during the week, her gentle smile lighting up her face. Sophia ran to hug her. As soon as the door opened, and Marina scooped her up, spinning around with the girl and making her laugh. It was such a pure, genuine scene that for a moment Michael almost believed he had been wrong about everything. But then he remembered the recording, and the anger returned. "Marina, we need to talk," he said, his voice harsher than he intended. "Before you start with Sophia today." Marina put the girl down, her expression shifting to concern. "Is everything okay?" "No, it's not." Michael took his phone, connected it to the living room sound system, and pressed play. Marina's voice filled the room, talking about opportunities, about Michael, about money. Marina turned pale, her eyes widening as she listened. When the audio finished, she shook her head, taking a step back. "That's not what it sounds like," she said quickly. "I never said that, not like that." "Then how did you say it?" Michael asked, his voice sharp. "Because what I'm hearing is you admitting you're here for the money, that you see my daughter as an opportunity." "No!" Marina exclaimed, tears starting to fall. "That was taken out of context. I was talking to my friend about something else. Someone edited this. Someone changed what I said." "Of course they did," Michael replied sarcastically. "It's always the same excuse, isn't it? When you get caught, you say it was a misunderstanding, that it was edited, that it's not what you meant." "Michael, please," Marina begged, reaching a hand out to him. "You know me. You know who I am. I would never do this to you or Sophia. Never." "I thought I knew you," he said coldly, "but I was wrong." Sophia had stopped playing. She was standing in the middle of the room, watching the two, adults with wide eyes, feeling the tension in the air. She began to rock back and forth, a sign that she was getting agitated. Michael saw it, and something inside him broke. He looked at Marina, saw the tears on her face, saw the genuine pain there, but he couldn't let go of the fear of being deceived, the fear that his daughter would be hurt, the fear that everything he had started to believe in was a lie. "I want you to leave," he said, his voice low but firm. "And don't come back." Marina sobbed, covering her mouth with her hands. Sophia ran to her, hugging her legs tightly, starting to make the high-pitched sounds of distress she made when she was about to have a meltdown. Marina knelt, hugging the girl, her tears falling onto Sophia's brown hair. "You are so brave," Marina whispered to the girl, her voice broken. "So brave and so special. Never forget that, okay? Never forget." Sophia tightened her hug, refusing to let go. Marina had to gently pry the girl's small arms away, standing up with difficulty. She looked at Michael one last time, and what he saw in those eyes haunted him. There was no anger, only sadness, only pain, only the expression of someone who had been unjustly judged and knew that nothing she said would make a difference. "I really thought you were different," she said softly. "I thought you had learned to trust, but I guess I was wrong." She grabbed her bag and left, closing the door behind her with a softness that somehow made everything worse. Michael stood there, motionless, listening to Sophia's sobs begin to grow. The girl fell to the floor, banging her hands against the cold tile, screaming in a way he hadn't heard in weeks. All the progress, all the evolution, everything seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. He knelt beside his daughter, trying to calm her, but Sophia pushed him away, pushed with surprising force for someone so small. She didn't want him. She wanted Marina, and Marina was no longer there. The next few hours were a nightmare. Sophia refused to eat. She refused to sleep. She just cried inconsolably until she finally fell into an exhausted sleep in the middle of the afternoon. Michael put her in bed, covered her carefully, and left the room, feeling empty, hollow, as if he had lost something essential but couldn't quite name what it was. He spent the following days on a kind of autopilot. He went to work. He came home. He tried to take care of Sophia, but the girl had changed. She had retreated back into silence, into repetitive movements, into shutting down. It was as if the last few weeks had never happened, as if Marina had never existed, and the guilt that Michael tried not to feel began to grow, insidious and relentless. Beatrice showed up the following Wednesday, bringing dinner, and that satisfied expression of someone who had been right. "You did the right thing," she said, serving the food. "You protected Sophia. You protected yourself." But Michael didn't feel protected. He felt destroyed. On Friday night, 2 weeks after he had thrown Marina out, Michael was alone in his penthouse office when his phone buzzed. A new message from Beatrice. Just an attached audio file, no text. He hesitated, then pressed play. It was the same conversation, Marina's same voice. But this time it was complete, unedited, undistorted, and what Michael heard made him feel as if the floor had vanished from under his feet. In the full recording, Marina was talking about her work with Sophia, about how rewarding it was, about how she felt an enormous responsibility. Her friend had asked if Michael paid her well for her time, if there was an opportunity to make money there. And Marina had replied with absolute clarity that it wasn't about the money, that it would never be about the money, that she was there because Sophia needed her, because she cared, because somehow that broken family had become important to her in a way she couldn't explain. The parts Michael had heard in the edited version were there, but completely out of order, cut and rearranged to seem like something they never were. It was a lie, a sham, a cruel manipulation. And he had believed it. He had heard that fake recording and, instead of giving Marina the benefit of the doubt, instead of trusting her, he had judged her, condemned her, and thrown her out. He had destroyed the only good thing that had happened in his life and in Sophia's life because he was afraid, because he couldn't believe he deserved something real. Michael felt bile rise in his throat. He ran to the bathroom and threw up, his body shaking violently. When he finally managed to stand, he looked at his own reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize the man he saw there. He didn't recognize the coward. He didn't recognize the fool. He didn't recognize the father who had failed his daughter in the worst possible way. He returned to his office on shaky legs, picked up his phone, and called Beatrice. She answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy. "Hello?" "Why did you send me this?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse. "Why did you send me the full recording?" There was a long pause. Then Beatrice sighed. "Because the investigator sent it to me. He said he made a mistake with the first version, that he'd sent the edited file by accident." "By accident?" Michael repeated, incredulous. "Beatrice, you destroyed everything. You made me destroy everything. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" He laughed, a humorless sound. "You made me accuse an innocent woman. You made me throw out the only person who managed to help my daughter. And now Sophia is suffering. She's closing up again. She's losing everything she gained. Because of you. Because of me." "Michael, I didn't know." "But you should have," he said, his voice breaking. "You should have checked first. You should have trusted me to make my own choices. And I should have trusted her. I should have believed in Marina. And now she's gone and I don't know if I'll ever be able to fix this." He hung up before Beatrice could respond, throwing the phone onto the desk. He put his head in his hands, and for the second time in a few weeks, Michael Anderson allowed himself to cry. Cried for the daughter who was suffering. He cried for the woman he had unjustly hurt, and he cried for himself, for the man who was so afraid of being vulnerable that he had ended up destroying his only chance at happiness. He had to find her. He had to apologize. He had to make Marina understand it had been a terrible mistake. But how? How do you find someone you've thrown out of your life? How do you ask for forgiveness for something so unforgivable? Michael spent a sleepless night making plans. The next day, long before the sun rose, he picked up a still-sleeping Sophia, put her in the car and started driving. He didn't know exactly where. He didn't know exactly what he would do when he found her. But he knew he had to try. For Sophia, for Marina, and for himself. Because some things, some people are worth fighting for, even when you're not sure you deserve them. The search began as the sun rose over Chicago. Michael drove through the still empty city streets, with Sophia strapped into her car seat in the back, still drowsy, clutching the old drawing Marina had made on that first day. The girl hadn't let go of that crumpled napkin since Marina had left, as if it were the last piece of something precious she couldn't get back. Michael had tried calling the coffee shop the night before, but the manager informed him that Marina had quit 2 weeks ago. She hadn't left a forwarding address, no contact number. She had simply vanished, as if she had never existed. The only clue Michael had was a casual comment Marina had once made about living somewhere on the south side, in a simple neighborhood where the rent was cheaper. It wasn't much, very little, but it was all he had. They started at the coffee shop where Michael spoke at length with Marina's former colleagues. One of them, the grey-haired woman who always worked beside Marina at the counter, looked at him with a mixture of pity and disapproval. "She cried a lot after she left here that day," the woman said, crossing her arms. "Said she was wrong to trust, said she should have never gotten involved." I made a terrible mistake, Michael admitted, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. I need to find her. I need to apologize. The woman studied his face for a long moment, then sighed. I don't know where she's living now, but she used to take the bus on the main avenue, the line that went towards Bridgeport. That's all I know. Michael thanked her and went back to the car. Bridgeport was big, densely populated. Finding one person there would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, but he had no choice. He had to try. They spent the entire day driving through the neighborhoods of the South Side. They stopped at every bakery, every diner, every coffee shop, showing a picture of Marina that Michael had on his phone, a picture he had taken without her noticing on one of those happy Sundays that now seemed to belong to another lifetime. Most people shook their heads. Some thought they recognized her, but weren't sure. No one knew where she was. Sophia started getting restless in the mid-afternoon. Michael stopped at a park, let the girl play for a bit, and they ate sandwiches he had bought at a deli. But Sophia barely touched her food. She just held the napkin, looking at the drawing with a sad expression. That broke Michael's heart. We're going to find her, Princess, he promised, kneeling in front of his daughter. I promise I won't give up. Sophia looked at him with those deep, dark eyes, and Michael saw something there he had never seen before. He saw a question. He saw doubt, as if the girl were silently asking if she could trust him, if he would really keep his promise this time, and that, more than anything, motivated him to continue. They got back in the car and resumed the search. More neighborhoods, more questions, more closed doors and unfamiliar faces. The day grew dark, the city lights began to flicker on, and Michael felt desperation rising. What if he couldn't find her? What if Marina had left Chicago? What if she never wanted to see him again? He was about to give up when he saw it. It was a small bakery, almost hidden between other shops, with a discreet sign and windows lit by a warm yellow light. Something about the place caught his attention. Maybe it was the way the light spilled from the windows. Maybe it was just instinct, or maybe it was fate. He parked. Car in front, turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, just looking. Then he took a deep breath, lifted Sophia into his arms, and went inside. The bell above the door tinkled softly. The bakery was almost empty, just a few late customers having coffee and eating still warm bread. The smell of yeast and cinnamon filled the air, familiar and comforting. Michael looked around, his heart pounding, searching. And then he saw her. Marina was behind the counter, in a white apron dusted with flour. Her hair in a loose bun, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She was taking a tray of bread out of the oven, focused, not noticing that someone had come in. The golden light of the bakery illuminated her face, and Michael thought he had never seen anything so beautiful. "Marina," he called, his voice coming out quieter than he intended. She looked up, and when she saw him, when she saw Sophia in his arms, the tray slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the bakery. Bread rolls scattered across the floor. The few customers looked up, surprised, but Marina didn't move. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes wide, her mouth agape in shock. Sophia began to struggle in Michael's arms. He put her down, and the girl ran like she had never run before, her arms outstretched, her small feet pattering against the wooden floor. Marina came out from behind the counter, falling to her knees and opening her arms just in time for Sophia to throw herself into them. The two of them hugged tightly, crying, rocking back and forth, clinging to each other as if they feared it was a dream they might wake from at any moment. Michael approached slowly, feeling his own tears fall down his face. "Marina," he said again, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry, so sorry. I was wrong, completely wrong. The recording was fake. It was edited. I heard the full version. I know the truth now. And I'm asking for your forgiveness. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come back, but please, at least let me apologize, please." Marina looked up at him over Sophia's head, her eyes red and swollen. "You hurt me," she said simply. "You hurt me so much. I know, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But if you give me a chance, a single chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving you were right, proving that I can trust, proving that I can be the man you and Sophia deserve." Before Marina could answer, Sophia pulled back a little, looking at Marina's face with intensity. The girl opened her mouth, and Michael saw her lips move, forming a word. A word she had never managed to say. A word that would change everything. "Home," Sophia said clearly and perfectly. "Home." The world seemed to stop. Marina covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing. Michael fell to his knees beside them, wrapping them both in his arms. And there, on the floor of that simple bakery, smelling of fresh bread and golden light, 3 broken lives began to heal. "Marina," Michael whispered against her hair, "marry me." She pulled away, looking at him with wide eyes. "What?" "Marry me. Now. Here. We don't need a ring. We don't need a ceremony. You just have to say yes. Because I love you. I love you in a way I've never loved anyone. And I know I don't deserve it. I know I messed everything up. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix it. I'll be better. I'll trust. I'll open my heart. If you'll let me." Marina looked at Sophia, who was watching her with that silent intensity. Then she looked back at Michael, and she smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They kissed right there, on the floor of the bakery, while Sophia laughed and clapped her hands, and the few customers present began to applaud as well. And for the first time in a long time, Michael felt something he had forgotten was possible to feel. He felt hope. He felt happiness. He felt like he was finally home. The following months were a complete transformation. Michael sold the cold, impersonal penthouse in Chicago and bought a small property in the countryside just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. It was an old farm, surrounded by fields of wildflowers and ancient trees. It had a main house of exposed brick, with large windows and wide porches. It had an old barn that needed renovating. It had land, it had space, it had life. Marina moved in, as soon as they were officially married, in a simple courthouse ceremony with only a few close friends. Sophia was between them, in a white lace dress, holding a bouquet of daisies she had picked herself. The girl couldn't stop smiling, and her vocabulary grew every day. They weren't complex sentences yet, but they were words, real words, words that connected. Marina transformed the old barn into a community center for children like Sophia, children who needed help communicating, children whose families couldn't afford expensive therapies. She worked tirelessly, painting walls, organizing materials, creating stacks of illustrated cards. Michael funded everything quietly, without fanfare, without expecting recognition. He just wanted to give Marina the means to do what she did best: help. The center opened its doors on a sunny Saturday morning. Few children came at first, but Marina welcomed them with the same gentle smile, the same infinite patience she had used with Sophia. And little by little, more families began to show up, more children began to blossom. And Marina, who had always dreamed of making a difference but never had the means, was finally doing just that. Michael changed too. He delegated more responsibilities at the company, spent less time at the office, more time at home. He learned to make breakfast. He learned to braid Sophia's hair. He learned to simply be present, something he had never done before. And he discovered that being vulnerable, being open, being human, wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was the greatest strength of all. Sophia ran through the fields every day, her hair flying in the wind, her bare feet on the soft grass. She talked more now, not perfectly, not like other children her age, but she talked. She said what she wanted, she said what she felt, and she laughed. Laughed so much that sometimes Michael had to stop what he was doing just to absorb the sound, to record it in his memory, to never forget how different everything could have been if he hadn't found the courage to search for what he had lost. Beatrice showed up once, months later, with apologies and guilt in her eyes. Michael forgave her. Not because it was easy, but because Marina had taught him that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It was about freeing yourself from the weight that anger carried. And Michael didn't want to carry weights anymore. He wanted to live lightly. He wanted to love freely. He wanted to be happy. The wedding ceremony they had months later was everything the courthouse one had not been. It was on a spring day, under the shade of a huge oak tree in the center of the property. They invited everyone from the community center. The children, the families, the volunteers Marina had recruited. There were flowers everywhere, musicians playing guitar, a long table with simple but plentiful food. Marina wore a simple but beautiful white lace dress, her hair loose and falling over her shoulders. Sophia stood beside her, in another white dress, this time with pink ribbons. Michael wore a suit but no tie, the collar of his shirt open, his feet bare on the grass like everyone else. When it was time for the vows, Michael held Marina's hands and said the words he had rehearsed for days, but that, in the moment, came straight from the heart. I spent my whole life building walls, protecting myself, controlling everything. But you taught me that love is the exact opposite. It's tearing down walls, it's trusting, it's being vulnerable. You gave me my daughter back. You gave me a family. You gave me a home. And I promise in front of everyone here that I will never again let fear destroy what we have. I will trust you. I will open my heart. I will be the man you deserve. Every day. For the rest of my life. Marina cried. Everyone cried. And when she said her own vows, about second chances and finding family in the most unlikely places, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. But the most emotional moment came later, during the reception. Sophia was dancing with some of the other children from the center when she suddenly stopped. She looked at Marina, who was talking with some parents near the food table, and then Sophia ran to her, pulling on the hem of her white dress to get her attention. Marina knelt, getting down to the girl's level. "Yes, sweetie." Sophia looked at her with those deep, dark eyes that now shone with a light that wasn't there before. Then, with complete clarity, with absolute certainty, she said the word Marina never imagined she would hear. "Mommy!" Marina broke down. She fell to her knees right there, hugging Sophia tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael ran to them, wrapping them both in his arms, and as the party continued around them, as the music played and people laughed and celebrated, that family of three, formed not by blood, but by choice, by love, by second chances, remained there, embraced, complete. At night, after everyone had gone home, after Sophia had been put to bed, sleeping soundly with a smile on her face, Michael and Marina sat on the porch swing. The sky was clear, filled with stars. The air smelled of flowers and the damp earth from the light rain that had fallen late in the afternoon. "Thank you," Michael said softly. "For what?" "For not giving up, for accepting my apology, for giving me a second chance, for loving my daughter, for loving me." Marina took his hand, lacing her fingers with his. "Our daughter," she corrected gently. "And as for you, I didn't have a choice. I think I was in love with you since that first day in the coffee shop. I just didn't know it yet." Suddenly, a shooting star streaked across the sky, bright and fleeting. Marina pointed, smiling. "Make a wish." Michael looked at her face illuminated by the soft light spilling from the house window. "I don't need to," he said. "I have everything I've ever wanted right here." She leaned in, kissing him softly. "Then promise me one thing. Anything. Promise you'll never let fear win again, that you'll never build walls again, that we'll face everything together, no matter what happens." Michael wrapped her in his arms, resting his chin on the top of her head. "I promise. Whatever happens, we face it together. Always." They stayed there late into the night, rocked by the gentle motion of the swing, listening to the sounds of the country night, crickets chirping, the wind in the trees, the soft breathing of Sophia in the next room, sleeping peacefully, finally at peace. And that is how three lives that were broken, that were lost, that were trapped in their own fears and limitations, found healing. They found family. They found home. Not in a place, but in each other. Michael had learned that being strong wasn't about never showing weakness. It was having the courage to be vulnerable. Marina had learned that helping others didn't mean giving up on herself. It meant finding purpose. And Sophia had learned that she had a voice that deserved to be heard, a voice that had value, a voice that could say, "I love you," "home," "mommy," and all the other beautiful words that existed, and together they built something that none of them could have built alone. They built a home, not made of walls or ceilings, but made of love, forgiveness, courage, and second chances. A home that was exactly what it was always meant to be from the beginning. A feeling, a belonging, a family, and so under the starry sky of the Wisconsin countryside, with the smell of wildflowers in the air and the distant sound of the community center being built, that family that fate had brought together in the most unlikely way decided that no matter how many storms came, no matter how many challenges they faced, they would remain together, always together, forever together. Because some stories don't end, they just begin again. And this one, the story of Michael, Marina, and Sophia, was just beginning. And it would be a beautiful story, it would be a love story, it would be a story of redemption. And, above all, it would be a story of family, the family they chose to be, the family they deserved, the family they finally were. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Michael, Marina, and Sophia has deeply touched your heart. If you are moved by this journey of love, forgiveness, and second chances, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it the reunion in the bakery? Was it when Sophia called Marina mommy for the first time? Or was it Michael's courage to admit his mistakes and fight for what truly mattered? Every day we bring intense and emotional stories like this one, which reveal the deepest and truest side of the human soul, showing that it's never too late to start over, and that true love always finds a way. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another story that will make you believe in the transformative power of forgiveness and family.